So today I am giving you guys a tutorial on how to render figures, how to render body parts, and how to hack your brain into knowing how to do this. So the first and very most important step is this thing right here. It's called a sphere. And we're going to select a skin tone that's pretty averaged out. I'm not going to try to select one too pale, too dark. Just something that kind of looks like my own as the midtone. And the code I used for it is AE7967, so you can follow along. All right, so we're going to smack that right there. I made a nice background value that had some light coming from above. I'm going to lock this layer. I'm going to get soft brush, and I'm going to slide the slider into yellow a little bit and drag on along a slant, along an angle or a slope, not straight up or straight down from where I was, along an angle. And I'm going to select a value that I feel like would be a good highlight value. In a new layer, I'm just going to swatch all of these values for myself. Then from that same value, I'm sliding into red, deeper into red, which connects me to the cools. Look how cool that looks compared to the base tone. And I'm going to go down along that slant. And I'm going to get my shadow value. These are pretty good. Then go back to the base tone, select the base tone again, and we're just going to slide into red and move to the right to find our mid-tone blush values. And then we're going to select the highlighter and slide to the right again and slide down into red again and find find the highlight blush values, and the same thing with the shadow. Slide into red, and if it doesn't go deeper, we go up to purple, right up here, because that's where these two connect in the big sphere of the color wheel. And we're going to slide to the right and select a blush value. You can make it a bit more red since we're in the shadows. Hey Istebrak, can you release a masterclass on form studies? There is one coming very, very soon, as I announced last time. So the most important thing about figure drawing is knowing where you're going to put the light source, okay? So the light source in this case, let me bring the mic a little closer to me. The light source in this case is coming from top down at a 45-degree angle. So not quite from completely over the head, but also not directly in front of the face on the camera. Something in between the camera and complete overhead. And so I'm going to select the shadow color, lower opacity. I'm on the same locked layer, and I'm going to try to make this sphere look three-dimensional and make it look like skin. So I picked skin tones. And as I add more paint, I shrink my brush. I have not touched the opacity at all. I'm going to do the same thing with the highlight, but for the climb of the sphere. Shrinking my brush as I climb further. The final key to making skin look like skin is getting pure white and using it to create a highlight. All right, and then I'm just going to use some of the blush tones in between here and there, just messing around with the blush tones. And then I'm going to get that peachy tone or whatever it is, and I'm going to use it along the bottom for that terminator line. Okay, so now we have a very skin-like value. You can add a bit more redness to it if that's something you feel like your character needs. Okay, so now we're going to do the insane. We're going to morph this sphere into tons and tons and tons of body parts. And that's the moral of the story. That's the lesson of today, is that if you know how to render this, you know how to render the human body. So this is going to be quite the endeavor. So bear with me. All right, we're going to have, let me start with the torso. We're going to have the value of the torso, which is the general shape of the torso, okay? And we're going to shape that into a torso. So I'm going to liquefy the sphere in the shape of a torso, meaning it's going to be the torso without the arms, neck, just the chest, and the waistline. So it's starting to feel a little bit familiar, just like Blender, right? Almost like we're sculpting. Has your brain been hacked yet? Are you feeling the hacking happening? Okay, so that's torso number 1, piece 1. I'm going to duplicate that layer again, and I'm going to bring in the next piece, which is going to be 2 little shoulders attached on top of the torso. All right, select and paste on the other side. And this is going to be a stylized body type, not necessarily hyper-realistic. Hyper-realistic or very representational requires just a bit more referencing and form. And that's not something I can pull off today, but I'll try. I'm not going to be able to do it completely realistic. So I want to finish the rest of the torso, and I do so by adding the lower piece of the torso, and I'm going to connect it to the original torso piece, go into liquefy, hopefully it doesn't give me an error, and I'm going to complete the shape. This is going to be a female. All right. And in order for something to look feminine, you have to remember what the female body type looks like. Alrighty. And so I'm just shaping it. I'm going to create a space for the hips by poking out the hip bone. And then I'm going to shape out the crotch area. And I'm going to push in the thigh socket. Okay, the thigh socket, the hips. I'm going to shape around the shoulders, and I'm going to pull out the neck. Hey, look, rendering a body is super easy. So if you don't have access to liquefy, that's okay. If you don't have access to digital art, that's also okay. If you know how to render a sphere, you can render everything. And this is the proof. I'm jutting out the bones of the ribs a little bit. And I'm going to use the leftover shadow to create almost like the armpit area. And pushing in the rib cage near the armpit. Hey, Istebrak, how do I know what's what and what's where? Well, you start looking and taking notes. Start making notes of the bodies you see. Start sketching the body. And eventually you'll know when a rib cage is expected or when it's time to bump in the upper shoulder collarbone area. Okay, and I'm just continuing to do this. It's already looking rendered, even though all I did was render one sphere. Do you feel hacked? Do you feel hacked? All right. And I'm pushing in a little bit more. Gave her big hips, kind of referencing my own body over here. All right. And then I'm going to make the shoulders a bit more relaxed. Clean up around the neckline. Look at how easy that was. Okay, we don't have to stop here. We can add the thighs as well. So I'm just going to size these according to the shoulder area. So the shoulder is like a lobe. It has a very lobe-like shape to it. And I want to make sure we have that. So each shoulder is going to get one of these little lobes there. Very, very important detail. Okay, we can reduce the opacity of the shoulder lobes though, but I can do that later. I'm going to go back to my original sphere, elongate it, and push it together and shape it into a thigh. What does a thigh look like? Well, it's big at the top and it's thin at the bottom. And it reaches the knee on sort of a bump. So obviously the human body has geometry to it. There is geometry in the human body. And the thigh highlight stretches all the way down sometimes. Not a perfectly globe-like subject. Okay. This is why I needed liquefy. And then I'm going to place that there. Duplicate it for the other side. Flip it. Okay. We're piecing together our little Frankenstein. Frankensteina. Oopsie. And Frankensteina. And I'm going to merge all this together as soon as I correct the torso just a little bit. So obviously you can do this with a sketch beforehand. Unfortunately, I did not have the time to do a sketch. I would have loved to have a sketch ready so that we can have, less correction later, but it's okay. I can work with both. And I'm just continuing this pelvic shape to match the thighs. Okay, super, super easy. And these thighs, you can keep them a bit on the bigger side. You can keep them on the thinner side. And then I'm going to just adjust the the area one more time to the thigh. All right, so now I'm going to merge that down. I'm going to merge the shoulders down. I'll reduce their opacity in a little bit. Now we have all of this. We're going to do just one more little section, which is going to be for the legs, which is going to be the shins. Make sure I get the right size first. All right. Remember, for anyone watching who's watching with a bit of, an eye on their own body, seeing me draw this body instead of another type of body, for no reason did I pick this particular body type. I hope that, me picking this body type didn't make you feel any kind of way about your body type. So I'm just making that shin bone area and the calves. And making sure to stretch down that value of that spot. I made you feel like a man. And then I'm going to flip horizontal and use it on the other side. Yes, I'm flipping the layers. I'll be doing one last liquefy once all the parts are pieced together. But it's all just to show you that once this is all pieced together and set up in a way that looks right and feels right, all that's left after it is blending. I'm just going to thicken them up to match a little bit. All right, do you see that? It's already responding to the light source because we already made it an object that responds to the light source. So what's really left? I'm going to add the arms in a second, but because the arms get in the way, I'm just going to liquefy this area and think about a natural standing gesture, the way Sorry, my children are playing. Both of them are playing, my cat and my bird. It's playtime, I guess. And I'm trying to make the body respond to gravity. Sophie, Mama, can we do that later? Huh? She's so cute. No, can we do that later? And then I'm going to push in the torso. Yeah, I know. I love you too. And I'm just going to shape out the shoulders and keep, okay, I guess she's like, no. Sorry about that rattling in the background. It's my bird. And I'm going to kind of push out the hips a little. Shape this thigh area. Push the thighs out a little bit on the inside. Push up the pelvic bone just a little. Alrighty. The neckline still feels just a bit stiff, but that's okay. And then I'm going to connect and slide the thigh into the calves and push the calves in. That's all I need to do, which is technically the sketch part, which I didn't have ready this time around. I also need to bend in the calves, but I'll do that in a little bit. All right, so right here, I'm just adjusting these so it feels more like a natural standing character than a weird mutation or something in the legs. Okay, so that's pretty much a decent outline for now. Then the arms and the legs I'll add in at the very end. For now, I'm just going to focus on this. So this is pieced together by a bunch of shapes that respond to the light source, and they all represent what this section in the body would do in relation to the light source. So let's start blending. I'm going to blend the shoulders into the torso. Very, very quickly, this will start to look familiar. And half of you, when you guys render body types, you forget the core shadows. So now this is a form study that is responding to the light source. Okay. I'm going to continue blending. I'm going to blend this area, keeping some of the crease of the crotch line. All right, blending that upward. Not all of the knee gets blended with the same size brush, but a lot of it. There are also additional parts, obviously, like the chest and the stomach area. So I'm going to grab our sphere one more time and place it over the stomach area. Just around here, there's always that little bump. And I'm going to just try to expand it and fit it into its area. This is for a female body type. Male body types look very, very different from this. I'm going to reduce the opacity because I don't need that much strength in that area. It's just that little bit of fat in the area. Even thinner people have this type of visceral fat, and I'm going to blend it out and connect it to it. It just gives us a little bit of that bump that we would see in that spot. Okay, and then obviously the two breasts, so 1 and 2. Okay, let's make her a modest gal. So we like to lean the breast a little bit over one side just to show that it's responding to gravity, made it from a different material, let's say, a different type of tissue and different type of composition, meaning it's full of fluids and fats compared to, let's say, muscles, which are full of harder stuff. Okay, and then we're going to merge those together and only merge the very top of those breasts. We're not merging the bottom. Those breasts sit on top of the body, on top of the torso. So it means they cast a shadow. So I can literally just do a drop shadow. This is hilarious. I can just do a drop shadow coming off the top and just expand that distance. And that's literally all you need to do to render the breast, which is so hilarious. I'm not going to keep the drop shadow, but I'm keeping it for now just so that you guys can see its influence. Okay? But I'm going to remove the breasts just so we can address all of the extra levels of rendering now required. So now that everything is one piece, we have to go back to our palette, go back to these, and get rid of most of that spherical nature of the sphere and give it those geometric qualifications that shape the human body. Usually the head is casting a shadow down over the neck. Cast shadows, make sure they taper. Okay? Usually collarbones make an entrance. Usually just all that's required is for you to cast the shadow of the collarbone. Don't over-define the collarbone. It may make the character look sickly, even though it looks perfectly natural in real life. So I'm blending that out. And then I'm also, again, my whole skin tone is right here, showing me how to use it. I'm using a bit of highlight on top of the collarbone, but also blending those together. This is going to shape up pretty quickly, so pay attention. And then I'm going to do that little divot of the armpit, just on either side of the shoulder, or under either side of the torso, under the shoulder. You guys know where your armpits are, right? They showed you guys that when you were kids. The fuck. And then I'm going to just blend around this area a little bit. By the way, the PSD for this tutorial will be given to patrons of all tiers. So if you guys want this PSD, and it also supports my channel and supports what I do, you guys can hop over to Patreon and join. Even the $1, $5, they all get the PSD for this. All right, and then what's going to happen is I'm going to show where the chest area or the chest wall may be catching light right before the breasts start. So I don't want the breasts visible just yet, but I'm preparing the base on which they are visible. Right above the stomach area, some of the diaphragm is visible, so I'll turn on the breast just to see where it is. The diaphragm area is visible, meaning that that lower part of the rib cage starts to jut out just a bit, catching the light. And between the breasts, we end up seeing a little bit of light. Not every body looks like this, but for the sake of your, commissions and getting a job and having to draw characters, it gets pretty useful to learn the basic fundamental, kind of like a neutral body type for a female. No specific trope attached. And then what we see usually is, on fit characters anyway, a splitting of, and sometimes on not fit people either, a splitting of that diaphragm highlight, meaning the space between the rib cage where the body starts to collapse a little bit into itself. The part that sticks out when you're full. When you're full, I don't know if the camera might caught that. And then I'm going to put a big dot okay? And what this dot is going to represent is obviously the belly button, but also the slow cyclone of values that start to happen around this area. The proportions of this body are all over the place for now. They get adjusted later. The most important thing is remembering that you have core shadows right now. Look at these core shadows. They really, really read very well, all because of this guy right here. So it's okay if nothing is perfect. You're a digital artist. You can make all kinds of adjustments. And if this is something traditional, obviously practice many of these. Do your sketch, then think about the elongation and contortion of the central sphere. The belly button does something like a shadow that's radial climbing towards it. There should not be highlights on top of the belly button. The body kind of sinks before it sticks back out. And then we have a little highlight, moon-shaped highlight, I guess, for the belly button this way. All right. And I'm just adding that little highlight just above the belly button area, catching just a little bit of that light. I'm not doing any proportion measurements, nothing at all, just whatever my eye is telling me looks right or wrong for now. You can always make these adjustments later. And then I'm going to add like almost a very delicate outline shadow around the stomach. It's almost like outlining the stomach area, but we still have that really strong core shadow sphere shape right here. All right. So remember, the goal is not to keep the sphere looking like a sphere because we're not blob people. All right. And then I'm going to carry that highlight of the stomach a little lower and then try to get that groin area here. The groin can be a bit darker because it's completely looking away from the light. But if I want to add a little bit of that extra detail there, you can add that little bit of light. All right, and then sometimes we get a little bit of an extra highlight on either side of this bone pelvic area. And then that pelvic bone really sticks out, catching some of that light. Different body types are different. I'm just referencing what I know. And we get, like, obviously there's a crease here, but we get an edge first before the crease. So I can get my blocking brush to do the job way better than my soft brush could. And I'm going to find where that exact separation happens between the pelvic area and the thigh. And I'm going to let that kind of climb into the hip bone. Okay, and then make adjustments after that. Again, no real proportions are sought after right now. We're just trying to make sense of the values and the light source. This is all because of the light source. I'm going to zoom out, and this is a really critical step, and I'm going to get soft brush. And I'm going to get my darken value, or the blush darken actually. Actually, no, the regular darken. And I'm going to start laying down some really, really essential core shadows. The darkest dark of the groin area. Bit of extra shadow coming off that highlight. So I just added a highlight for the pelvic bone, right? Well, that translates into a cast shadow just under it. And then the cast shadow of the entire torso on the thigh, wrapping around the thigh. Just like that. In fact, I'm just going to color pick right out of this. Make it darken. So the whole thigh receives the shadow of the torso. And then I blend that out. We're blending a lot when it comes to the human body because it's so squishy. Right? And then I'm going to let some of the highlight emerge. So this really, really delicate soft brush layer, that large brush, that's going to be something that happens a lot as you continue to paint. The shadow of the thighs, as well as the rest of the shins, which aren't really facing the light, all get darkened as we go up. And then just continuing from a distance now, the shadow and shape of that pelvic area, trying to show where that line might be that separates them. She kind of looks like she's bending her legs. That might be because there's no line of shadow directly under, and because of the amount of highlight on the thigh, you can also reduce that so that there isn't that much light getting caught by those areas. Again, no real proportions are being added. Just the general proximities of everything. The knees catch a bit more light, and the very, very top of the thigh up here catches a bit more light. But the core shadows are all the same. So if you feel like your character is bending forward too much, just darken the thigh. That's all that's happening when someone bends forward. Their thigh catches more of the light. And this is an ambient occlusion area right here between the thighs. So I'm going to slowly shrink my brush as I add more paint. Just like that. And that's going to sneak up into the rest of the body. Where we have any kind of pit or crotch area, we're going to reject the light. Okay? Yes, this will be uploaded later. And then there's a shadow coming off the knees. Each knee casts a shadow as well. It sticks out when you look at the leg from the side. All right. Remember, these knees have not been adjusted. I'm going to turn the breasts back on. I'm going to turn off that drop shadow. And I'm going to blend some more for the breasts. They get blended wherever they connect and unblended wherever they hang over. So the lower part of the breast, we're not blending that. You can't blend this unless you're talking about really, really small breasts. Right, I'm going to blend a little bit on the seam where we do see the breast connect to the skin. Right. And then on both breasts is a little bit of light play as well. Sometimes the light travels sideways and then back into the chest bone. I'm going to get, because I'm doing highlights, I'm going to get the pure white and use it very carefully to create like a V shape above the breasts to the chest bone. Okay, and then I'm going to get the same white highlighter and use it on the top of the shoulders. Oopsie, wrong layer. Good thing I noticed. Top of the shoulders. Sometimes the back of the shoulders can get a bit dark wherever they start to turn away from the 45-degree angle. Remember, this is not overhead light. This is 45 degrees. And it kind of connects down into the breast highlight. Highlights the collarbones just a little bit. Goes in between the breasts a little bit and stops at the diaphragm. Right under those breasts, we need a cast shadow. So I'm going to draw the cast shadow, getting darker as I get closer to the breast. This cast shadow is really important. It does not make sense without it. Shrinking my brush as I add more paint. This is on a new layer. So the lesson I'm trying to make, the lesson I'm trying to give, the point I'm trying to make is if you know how to render basic shapes, you know how to render most of the human body. So if you're stuck on references and references are too overwhelming for you to follow, if sketching isn't really teaching you how to render anatomy, if you're having trouble understanding exactly what happens in human anatomy, it's never a waste of time to study forms. Okay? And then because the breasts are softer, a softer material, what we have to do is use blur on the lower part of the breasts. You never want a sharp breast shape because the texture of the object is reflected in the sharpness of its edge. Write that back to me. The texture of an object is reflected in the sharpness of its edge. So if you're going to try to render breasts, well, breasts are very squishy and soft and almost fluid-like. Doesn't make much sense to make them extremely hard. And then sometimes, because they are actually natural balloon bags, basically, or water balloons, you want to kind of make them sag a little bit. It makes them look more natural. So you see how it used to be a perfect spherical downward motion? Now I kind of just made it look like it's heavier on one side. Oops. All right, same thing on the other side. I'm gonna drag it down. It's okay if they're asymmetrical. It looks better if they are, because it'll look more natural. Okay, and then I don't want to merge it down just yet because I need access to that lower area. And I'm just gonna delete wherever I had shadow I didn't want. And then I'm going to use the shadows I have here to connect into the shadows of the breasts. So just up here, there should be just like a little hint of a shadow happening on either upper side of the breast. Okay? And then back to the torso. We want to catch a bit more light right under the breast shadow. Almost like a V shape. And that's for that diaphragm, the lower part of the rib cage. Sorry my sentences aren't complete right away. It's how my brain fog is lately. All right, and that's really, really important, or else it looks like your character's crouching forward. Make sure you have this little triangle of highlight. And we're gonna let some of that highlight kind of sneak down towards the belly button in a very just delicate way to show the bulge of the stomach. And then under each of these, not that every character's super skinny, but under each of these is a shadow, because that's the lower part of the rib cage, right? So it's jutting out, catching a little bit of shadow. I'm applying all of this with soft brush. Soft brush is the superior tool for this job. But take a moment and look around. See all these imperfections I have? So many little bumps and wrong decisions. That doesn't matter right now. All that matters is that you are preserving your core shadows that we started with. Oops, what the heck? I'm just making sure I didn't damage the breast core shadow. And those highlights get merged down. And then I'm going to do some serious ambient occlusion, which is the blackest black that can exist under the breast. You can make it more red, more purple. Stay away from pure black to shadow anything, because that makes the skin look very unnatural and very sickly. All right, and then for the belly button, it's not exactly in the right spot. Doesn't matter for now. You guys will have more proportionate sketches. I'm just doing a belly button shape that gradually gets darker, staying pretty, I guess, tight shaped all around. And then now I'm going to jump back into liquify and clean up my mistakes. I'm going to start with the torso area, making sure to get those shoulders looking similar. There's always like a V shape of the trapezius muscles moving down into the shoulder line. There's always the bump of the collarbone. Different body types don't have that. If it's a little bit of a heavier character, you have a lot of those miniature bones not really visible. By the way, this is the last class of the year. So if you want to do something with your New Year's resolutions, you want to get better at art, I want to get better, do some form studies. Look at how much you benefit from them. It's never wasted time. Do a bunch of spheres, blobs. Get so good at blobs, people come to you for lessons. Okay? And then I'm just pushing this in, trying to shape the face a bit. I mean, sorry, I'm so used to painting portraits. The rib cage a bit. The breasts will now come out of the sides. Not always, not every breast shape or breast size is visible from the edges. That came out wrong. And then I'm going to fix the fat of these, the waistline here. And I'm just going to make it kind of stick up a little bit. And I'm going to push it in wherever that hip bone I started earlier is, and just connect it back up. Okay, and I'm going to push that hip bone in one more time. Whatever looks right to my eyes, whatever feels like it's looking right. If it doesn't look perfect, who cares? Because most of the time the characters are wearing clothing. All right, and then the same thing around here. This is a pretty medium build, you know, not too thin, not too thick. You can thicken and thinify as much as you want after this. Really, it all works. There's no rules. Once you get those core shadows in, pick up a good reference and you will see the core shadows in the reference. And then there's like a little bump moving inward, sliding inward for the calves from the knees. Always a cumbersome area because there's so much bone structure to look out for. So on the other side, we're bringing that knee dent inward to wrap around the whole knee. And then we're pushing in most of the fat of the calves on the inside. On the outside, the calves thicken up. But on the inside, it's just the way we're built. They tend to be quite thin. Even on thicker people, we see more of the bulge of the calves on the outside. And then I'm just going to flatten this section. Istebrak, master of all blobs and geometry and polygons. They bow down to me. They will bow down to you the more you work on them. All right, and so I'm going to zoom all the way out just to get an idea of where I've made some mistakes. I can see some already. And I'm okay with this right now. There are some scale issues, so I'm just going to adjust them. Position of the belly button is a little bit weird. So, ooh, I don't have a redo. Oopsie. Well, that's okay. I'm pushing that down. And pushing that down. Kind of widening the shoulders a little bit. I can do anything I want at this stage. Lengthening the neck. Just like so. Pushing up the pelvic bone. Starting to look acceptable. And this is where it was before. So it's just what I think is reflective of what I know, right? And you guys can do whatever you feel like looks like a right body to you. The amount of combinations there are for the human body is insane. And then now I get to delete away at what I feel like can be perfected. So the side here. All right. I feel like I could clean that up maybe. And I'd be here all day, honestly, just perfecting where I can perfect. There are so many facets, little bones, little muscle groups that could use some extra attention. But this is the majority of it. I've demystified rendering figures for you. It's not hard. Once you study your forms, you can jump right into it. I mean, you could take it the long way. You could study only references or trace references, or do master studies, and maybe your brain will pick something up. Every brain is different. Every brain does things differently. But for those who want to stay safe with their learning method, to be able to render anything, not just a select few photographs they memorized, start with the form studies and then into referencing. So study form studies, then reference from photos of human figures. It's the more kind of safe way to study, because you don't end up being really, really good at one thing and can't render anything else. Form studies make sure you can render everything. There's a little bit of light getting rejected in between the two calves. And there's like a vertical straight line shadow of the calf area and the shin bones. So I'm going to try to capture that by darkening them even more and trying to use a straight line to go down to show where that shin bone is catching light. And sometimes there's a little shadow off that pouch area of the stomach. Can happen a bit higher as well. My torso feels a little bit elongated. I'm sure I will be able to fix it as I keep rendering. Today's class started a little bit late, so I'll be here a little bit. Also, it's the last class, as I mentioned earlier, so I don't mind being here a little late. I will be off for the rest of the holiday season. I will not be critiquing and doing critique hour until January. I will be working on a lot of tutorials for my channel, as well as doing some personal drawings and personal work of my own. I've been neglecting that just a little bit too much lately. And I'm going to select the whole body and kind of decrease its size. Oops, no. And move it down. Oh, okay, that doesn't work. All right, so Shiza, I'm gonna merge the boobies. I'm gonna finally connect the boobies down. All right, so I'm gonna shrink the. Okay, so where Istebrak's brain isn't working, you can tell it's the end of the year and the end of my brain cells. So I'm shrinking the body, and I'm bringing it lower, just to shrink that distance between the pelvic area and the rest of the body. Small little adjustments that don't really amount to much, but they kind of make me feel like things are looking right again. I'm going to just do a little bit of surgery here and there, but that's it. The body is done. Do you guys have any questions at all? Any questions at all? I'm kind of uncomfortable with this thigh gap. Don't know why, it just doesn't work. Maybe because I don't have one. So I'm going to just connect the legs together. Ooh, I messed up. I should not have merged down. I should not have merged down. All right, so we're gonna try that again. Oh, no, not quite yet. Nope. I have forgotten how to use Photoshop. Okay, so we're gonna push the legs closer together just a little bit. Bring that down. That feels a little bit more natural to me. And then I'm just gonna do a little something like that. Okay. And then at this point, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can dress up the character. You can add detail, whatever kind of detail is needed. You freaks. And then, then I'm just going to blend away this seam. So there are so many other areas that could use some highlight, like some of the stomach area here. So pure white, some of the stomach area, a little bit of the hips can catch some light. Oops, oops. A little bit of the hips can catch light. Okay, sometimes there's a bit of shadow outlining the body. all the way around, because as the skin rotates away from you, it rotates into the background away from the light. How do we draw? No, sorry, I can't read. Do we need to draw the body by making blobs? Can we do it without, after being more advanced? So you don't have to use blobs. You can sketch the body just as a stick figure and get all your proportions right, meaning foreheads high and foreheads beneath, foreheads from the hip up and foreheads from the hip down. Once you get those proportions, you can use blobs forever, because it's still solidifying the fact that you are focusing on your core shadows. That's what this whole tutorial is about, to show you that the core shadows are the most fundamental, important part of figure drawing. The core shadows and the subsequent shadows that are a result of them, meaning cast shadows, bounce light, terminators, all of those things. Right, so this PSD will be given to my patrons this month. So if you guys want to be a part of my Patreon, even $1 a month goes a long way to support my channel. So, and I really appreciate anybody who's hopped into Patreon. Thank you so much. So I'm just adding that little hip shadow there. That whole hip area can be quite funky. Just doesn't really make much sense. You know, sometimes the bones stick out, sometimes they don't, especially with female bodies, which can be so different from woman to woman. And I'm just continuing some more detailing here and there. That kind of shaping around the torso. The shadow of the torso on the hip. You can redo an area 10 times if you need it. There's no beginning, middle, and end. There's no timing, nothing like that. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get flagged by Instagram if I try to post this, because it's starting to look a lot like a naked person. I don't even know if I can make a reel out of this. I'm going to try. Maybe they'll flag me. I don't know. I'll try to contact that agent, the Instagram guy that talked to me. Maybe he can help me out. Do me a solid. I don't know how. All right. And then I'm going to blend out that knee area. And then I'm going to show you the power of the bounce light. So I'm going to add a bit of shadow here. I've gone crazy and I don't care. Adding a bit more of a dent for the thighs. Maybe even just darken the thighs, man. Like just darken them, get them out of the way, because the torso is blocking the light a lot of the time. So it really doesn't matter. They don't need to catch all the light. They just need some of the light traveling down. As you can see, the lower we go in the human body, the less light we have and the less contrast we have. So you could do this. Watch this. You could darken the entire lower half and no one would care, because it makes sense, because it's sticking away from the light. There's also a bit of an indentation above the knees. There's so many little, you know, nooks and crannies all over that you could skip some and nobody would really miss them. Someone might point them out, you know, maybe they're a bit of a stickler like me. but there's so many different types of bodies that store fat so differently. There's no rules as long as you have the general skeletal structure. Okay. Now I'm just making things symmetrical. I'll flip the body in a bit. All right, and try to fix this shoulder like that. And just make it a bit more symmetrical. Again, perfect symmetry for the human body is not always a good thing. A bit of asymmetry in the stance, a bit of this and that will make it look more realistic. at that. I ended up getting rid of those extra bumps in the hips anyways. See, like everything looks okay. Sometimes you have one hip line, sometimes you have two. There's no rules outside of the skeletal structure and the muscles and the general proportion of the human body that helps you walk, defy gravity for a short period of time, and stay upright until eventually you go to sleep to collect more energy to stay upright again the next day. All right, and then I'm gonna flip the canvas one more time. You could, if you wanted to, end the torso with a smaller rib cage so the breast comes out like that. That also looks right, you know, that you don't have to have such a wide rib cage, and you don't have to have such a thin rib cage. It's all about the body type you're after. So I'm going to try to do it. I might mess it up, but I have some time. The rib cage just looked a little bit big. So you'll obviously be doing this with better sketch, starting sketch. I wish I had time. I didn't even have time to prep class today, unfortunately, but next time, you know, when you do this, you'll have a sketch at the ready to guide your spheres as you're adding them down. It's not magic. It's just faking the third dimension, which is a form of magic. But that's where we are. All right. So the bounce light can be the background color. Look at that. It can be the exact color you have in the background used on top of the skin. And we're just going to lock the layer and we're going to reduce opacity. We are using the bounce light color of the background to sneak in bounce light all around this body. Suddenly, this body will look like it's really, really part of the background in this environment, part of this room, part of this entire atmosphere. I'm using the background color on top of everything, only on the sides where I feel like it'll catch some bounce light. And I'll go back and delete whatever I don't need. Okay. Small amount of value change that goes a long way. Look at that. That made the knee look so realistic, but it's just the most cheap application of values. It doesn't cost anything. Cheap in that it doesn't cost much to just formulate this and make it look realistic. Right, a little bit less on the thigh, but it's still there, making an impact. And just a little bit on the side of the rib cage, not too much. The gray of the background. That's it. That's all I did. And just make sure it's not too soft, or else it won't make an impact. Okay, so there's a lot of proportion issues already that I'm seeing, but I have so little time to address everything, and I didn't get to do my sketch, but usually legs kind of go like this inside, inward, for the foot area. So what we would do, instead of making them straight, we would just bend them inward on an angle. So they would look like this, like the whole leg is selected and bent inward. So that's what I mean. I don't want you guys to pick up the bad habit I just created. So it bends inward just like that. That looks more natural for the body. Oops. And I'm just going to do that with the other leg really quickly. This is just how the human body stands when the feet are pretty level with everything. This is just how it, oopsie. This is just how it looks. Okay. And what else do I want to do? I'd like to add the arms, but I am out of time. But the arms are pretty much the same exact situation as the thighs, really. It's just the elongated sphere moving down. There's a bit more shadow needed for the inner thigh area, almost like an S shape. Just like that. And the thighs look a bit long as well, so you could, if you ended up doing the mistakes I did. The point is, it's not so much about proportions today, it's about the shadows. There's a lot more detail you can add to the knees as well. Like you can make them a little bit more knobby. You can make them a little bit less highlighted. There's a lot more we can do, but it's enough that it's familiar now and recognizable. A little bit, I guess. And it works. And this is plus a sketch that you will do very, very well. A sketch that you will spend your time on, measure, do your research on. And you'll end up with exactly what you're looking for in the realism, because the sphere will not let you forget the core shadow. Write that back to me. I'm just using multiply to kind of strengthen the shadow of this lower torso area. And this goes far. This will make you splashes. This will make you character design layouts. This is enough. And the exact same thing with a male, but remember to keep things a little bit, especially if it's a muscular male, to keep things a little bit more on the squared sphere shape than the perfect squared sphere shape. Okay, and then I'm just perfecting this area here. Jutting out that bone just a little bit more clearly. Any other questions at all? This class is so informative. It's going to be easy if I want to change poses or limb positions. Is the 2D sculpting like Mrs. Potato Head for the parts of the body? Hi, Nico. I store fat in my fridge below the vegetables. Her booty is missing. Well, she's not facing backward. Unless you want me to draw a booty in the front. Is that what you'd like? And I'm just going to add a bit of that white highlight. And I'm going to let the jitter of my slow hand, kind of like, you know, that natural jitter when we have a slow brush stroke. I'm going to let it jitter because that makes skin look bumpy and that looks more natural. As for the blood level, so sometimes you can desaturate the thighs a little bit. There's a lot of blue vessels in there. If it's a darker skin tone, skip this step. Sometimes you can raise the total value of the breasts since they barely catch any light, meaning because they're always covered up, they end up being a little bit more pale. So you can sponge desaturate the breasts and use white kind of on top of them. You can add those tanned sections by using multiply on that shadow color we built. And you can just tan the skin except for the breasts. Then you can desaturate wherever we had highlights. And you can add extra saturation with this blush tone on color on the knees and the extremities, the head, the hands, the knees, and some of the stomach area all get a little bit of extra blood moving around in there because they're an extremity of some kind. Okay, so don't forget those zones. And then you can add some green, almost like a turquoisey green on the thigh highlight area, just to show those untanned areas. Same thing on the breast. It's kind of like veins that are blue, but against the yellow of the skin end up showing as green. You can show a little bit of that green there. And then I'm missing some shadow here that I wish I had just around the hip area. Feels like there's a shadow here that's missing. But I'm not quite sure. I'm kind of also exhausted. It's been a long final week of classes and my butt is thoroughly kicked. But I didn't want to cancel today's class. I wanted to hang out with you guys. So that's it for today. Was this helpful? Did you guys enjoy this tutorial? Do you feel like it's helped you understand figures a little bit better? I hope it did. What other figure body part would you guys like me to break down? Would you like me to use references? I feel like I've been neglecting figures. I have just one more change I'd like to do, which is, I forgot, right at the very end. I'm supposed to pinch this. I was going to do it when I added the arms, but I have no time. Just to pinch in that area here. It could use a little more work. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Thank you guys for watching. If you want this PSD, I'm giving it to my patrons just to flip through it and see how I work. If it might be educational for you, please do so. And you can submit your work for critique. Today I did not do a critique, but you can submit your work for critique on my subreddit. Go to istebrak.com and click on the subreddit icon right here. That'll take you to my subreddit where you can submit your work for critique. I will critique these at the start of the year. It's going to be form season for my apprentices. All my apprentices have assignments that are diagnostic at the start of the year. So from January to February, we dive right into form studies. We dive right into diagnostic portraits, closed room form studies, open room form studies, all of it. I'll see you guys in the new year. Happy New Year. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful break. And I'll be here when you guys get back. Thank you all for being my students this past year. I really appreciate it. Bye, guys.